From Illinois Public Media News, this is 217 Today. I'm Kimberly Schofield. It's Tuesday, October 8th. Coming up, we'll learn more about the problems that threaten America's generic drug industry. That story in just a few minutes, but first, these headlines. Vigils were held around the country and in Champaign yesterday to mark 1 year since an attack by Hamas killed about 1,200 people in Israel. IPM's May Antar reports on how locals are coping.
Hillel and Chabad Center came together on the University of Illinois Quad to mourn those lost and those still held hostage by Hamas. Sabrina Fellinger is a student with Hillel.
This is, for us, it's like a second Holocaust. This is a day that we will always remember.
In the year since Israel retaliated against Hamas, more than 40,000 people have been killed in Gaza. Ghada Abdullah is a therapist who led a small healing circle to honor those individuals.
The feeling of injustice and powerlessness, we're all trying to hold on to hope, which after a year, it's very hard.
Both sides say they need space to cope and want an end to all death and suffering. May Antar, IPM News.
With the election less than a month away, deep fake images are a growing concern. IPM student reporter Anna Ko has more on how to protect yourself from misinformation.
AI-generated images, videos, and audio are being used to spread misinformation at a time when voters are relying on digital media to learn about candidates. University of Illinois digital humanities librarian Mary Tunn says she shares the concerns of some who've spoken up against the publication of manipulated videos.
Taylor Swift came out and made a statement because she was worried about the potential impact of AI-generated images that were advancing a view that was not hers.
Tunn says it is important to stop and analyze an image or video before reposting it, and to check with credible sources when encountering something that could be AI-generated. I'm Anna Ko, IPM News.
Monday marks 1 year since 1,200 Israelis were killed by an attack from Hamas. Around 250 people were taken hostage. Yarden Asher is an Israeli graduate student at the University of Illinois. She told the 21st show the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians has spanned decades, but she is hopeful for better days.
I think it's very clear that, again, in my opinion, but that there needs to be a state for the Palestinian people, that they need to be, they have their own rights, their own sovereignty, and being in a peaceful state between our two states, between Israel and Palestine, I think, is the dream.
Israel's retaliatory offensive against Hamas has killed more than 41,000 Palestinians in Gaza. And a year later, Israel is now at war with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Officials also say the country will strike Iran in response to its ballistic missile attack on Israel last week. Jury selection begins today in the federal racketeering, bribery, and conspiracy trial of former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan. As Dave McKinney reports, a former juror who knows the evidence against Madigan will be watching closely.
Robert Garnes was a juror in last spring's federal trial of 4 former ComEd executives and lobbyists convicted of conspiring to bribe Madigan. Madigan wasn't charged then, but some of the same evidence will be used against him now. Garnes thinks the ex-speaker knew the utility was putting his political allies on its payroll to influence him based on how often Madigan's name kept surfacing in that trial.
It came up so many times, either directly or indirectly, that there's just no way that he could not know what was going on.
Madigan has denied wrongdoing. Dave McKinney, WBEZ News.
Still to come, we'll learn more about the problems that threaten America's generic drug industry. That story is coming up next on 217 Today. But first, meteorologist Andrew Pritchard with your forecast.
I'm meteorologist Andrew Pritchard with your IPM News forecast for Champaign-Urbana. Today, look for sunny skies with a high of 74 degrees and a northwest wind 5 miles per hour. Tonight, clear skies with a low of 46 degrees, a west wind 5 miles per hour. Tomorrow, sunny with a high of 78 degrees, a west wind 5 miles per hour. Tomorrow night, clear skies with a low of 48 degrees, and a west wind 5 miles per hour. And for Thursday, sunny with a high of 76 degrees, and an east wind 5 miles per hour.
Next time on the 21st Show, a conversation with Central Illinois Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski, who's running for re-election for the first time. We'll talk about abortion, the border, and the pro-Palestinian constituents who object to her support for Israel.
I do think it is important to continue to listen, to try to find the middle ground.
I'm Brian Mackey. That's next time on the 21st Show. Join us.
You're listening to 217 Today. I'm Kimberly Schofield. Unlike other countries, the U.S. does not regulate prescription drug prices. Instead, policymakers some 40 years ago decided to rely on the power of the free market. They made it easier for companies to copy brand name drugs and sell them at a much cheaper price, giving birth to the generic drug industry. That has saved Americans trillions of dollars, but there are signs that this system may be in trouble. Side Effects Public Media's Lizzie McGreevy spoke with senior producer Leslie Walker from the health policy news organization Trade-Offs about what's behind the problems that threaten America's generic drug industry.
So how critical are these generic drugs for our healthcare system, and why are they in deep trouble right now?
So these medicines really are the backbone of American healthcare. I mean, they now fill 9 out of every 10 prescriptions we take. They lower our cholesterol, manage our diabetes, depression, you name it. But this essential industry is now kind of being squeezed on two sides. So on one end, you've got these often very old generic drugs, critical stuff like antibiotics or cancer treatments that economists told me have almost gotten too cheap. And so that's forcing some companies to cut corners or exit this market altogether, causing shortages and quality problems. And then on the other end, Lizzie, you've got some newer, really pricey brand name drugs that are going 10, 15, even 20 years with no generic competition at all. And so that's hurting patients too.
And I can't help but think that this is 100% bad for consumers, but it may not be all bad for big pharma. You know, those brand name drug manufacturers. Do they have a hand in any of these problems?
So they certainly do when it comes to those newer, really pricey brand name drugs I just mentioned. I mean, Big Pharma has honed some pretty ingenious strategies for stifling competition, playing games with patents, paying the middlemen who buy drugs on behalf of insurers and employers to kind of favor their products over cheaper generic alternatives. And that's just to name a couple of things they're up to.
And Leslie, let's take a step back and talk about the other big issue that you highlighted, which is the shortage and the quality problems with these cheaper generics. We hear about shortages in the U.S. all the time, but especially since the pandemic. Are there signs that this is about to get worse?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Drug shortages have been kind of this perennial problem for a while now, but there are a couple signs it's getting worse. So, one recent report found the number of drugs in shortage is at a kind of 10-year high, and that shortages are also lasting longer than ever before, about 3 years on average. Plus, the supply chain for these drugs is also getting more fragile. So, like I said, these very low prices are pushing a lot of companies to kind of cut corners, and that means often moving more of their manufacturing and their ingredients to countries like India and China. And economist Marta Woshinska, who's with the Brookings Institution, she told me that's raising a kind of whole new mess of quality and reliability concerns for the U.S.
Are we prepared for supply chain disruptions from natural disasters? What could happen if there's a conflict with China? We have not really truly grappled with these kinds of vulnerabilities.
Are policymakers doing anything to try to shore this vital industry up?
There actually is quite a bit of action in Washington right now. So, for example, the Federal Trade Commission is trying to crack down on some of the games that brand companies play to stifle competition. And in Congress, there's a draft bipartisan bill that targets those cheaper drugs more prone to shortages, basically tries to kind of make those shaky markets more attractive and reliable for generic manufacturers. That said, most of the moves we're seeing are pretty modest, and some experts told me they think more sweeping reforms are needed. That includes one of the original architects of the 40-year-old law known as Hatch-Waxman that gave birth to the generic industry that we have.
It was the right thing at that time. We derived a lot of public benefit from it, but we put it on this perch and made it some kind of an untouchable law. But times have changed. You have to figure out a new paradigm for new times.
Leslie, thank you so much for this valuable information.
That was Side Effects Public Media's Lizzie McGreevy speaking with Leslie Walker, senior producer at the health policy news organization Trade-Offs. Walker produced a podcast series called Race to the Bottom, which explores the vulnerabilities of the generic drug industry. That's it for today. 217 Today is produced by Stephanie Mosqueda. Reporting today contributed by Anna Ko, May Antar, Kulsum Khan, Dave McKinney, and Lizzie McGreevy. Music by the Kilbourne Alley Blues Band. Reginald Hardwick is our news director. I'm Kimberly Schofield. 217 Today is a production of Illinois Public Media. Thanks for listening, stay safe, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.